This is CBC Here and Now.
Case of a massive implosion, that's not going to be an easy task because much of the craft will have disintegrated.
The focus now is what happened. We'll tell you about the investigations underway to find out why the Titan imploded.
We're all aware of how bad these problems are, but I definitely don't think this was the right response.
Why a plan to build a fence to protect the stage on George Street is facing pushback. Good evening and welcome to Here and Now. It's been 1 week since the world first learned about the missing submersible Titan. Tonight, investigators from across the globe are searching for answers about how and why the sub imploded. Here and Now's Heather Gillis has this update.
Investigations are underway in 4 countries, the US, Canada, the UK, and France, all after the same thing, the cause of Titan's implosion. Rear Admiral John Mauger of the US Coast Guard was in St. John's to speak with families. The crew of the Polar Prince will also be interviewed. The death of 5 people aboard Titan has prompted a Marine Board of Investigation. It's the highest level of investigation the American Coast Guard conducts. They're already mapping the accident site on the seafloor.
The NBI is currently in its initial evidence collection phase, including debris salvage operations at the incident site and evidence collection in coordination with Canadian authorities in the port of St. John's, Newfoundland.
The U.S. Coast Guard aims to find the cause of the implosion and can recommend criminal or civil sanctions. It'll also make recommendations to improve submersible oversight and safety.
But I think we're going to see a halt on deep sea exploration until a lot of this is discussed and figured out.
Tom Maddox is an underwater forensic investigator in New Jersey. He dove to the Titanic and immersed submersible in 2005, one of the last manned expeditions, until OceanGate took over in 2021. He expects debris on the ocean floor will give investigators clues about what happened to Titan.
Just like in an airline crash, they may try to reassemble the sub to put the parts together like a puzzle and determine where the failure point was. In the case of a massive implosion, that's not going to be an easy task because much of the craft will have disintegrated.
In the aerospace industry where we use those types
Eugene
of
Abramovich is a former aerospace engineer. He also does forensic engineering studies on how materials fail or break. He believes carbon fiber on Titan's hull could have fractured, a theory a previous passenger echoed in other media reports, saying he heard cracking sounds.
Cracks grew a little bit and it kept on going after the second one, the third one, the fourth one, and eventually the cracks reached such a length that the wall could not take the load. And this was probably the unfortunate moment when these people lost their lives. So major point here was that machine should have been inspected as rigorously and maybe even more rigorously than what we do with fuselages of airplanes.
American investigators say the public can expect to get some answers. That's because, according to the U.S. Coast Guard, investigations typically include public hearings with witness testimony. But with so much coordination with other countries and so much information to sift through, it's not clear how long that process will take. Heather Gillis, CBC News, St. John's.
Meanwhile, the Transportation Safety Board in this country will also investigate. Chair Kathy Fox says they'll do a safety investigation to find out how and why the Titan imploded. She says they've already interviewed family members and crew on the Polar Prince. The TSB will not assign blame, but they will make recommendations to prevent a similar tragedy in the future.
Vessels of this size are required to have a voyage data recorder which records audio that's on the bridge. The content of those voice recordings could be useful in our investigation, but the contents are privileged under Canadian law, and therefore we can't share what the voice recordings will say. They are protected.
And the police will also do their own investigation into the deaths. This weekend, the superintendent for the RCMP in this province said it will take time and expert opinion for them to look into whether there was any wrongdoing. It could lead to a full criminal investigation.
The RCMP investigates deaths that are of an unusual nature that need investigation. So ours would be to investigate the circumstances surrounding the deaths to determine if we should actually embark on a criminal investigation.
To other news now. A man is in critical condition after an ATV crash in Cape St. George. The RCMP says a machine went off the road and crashed into a tree on Friday night. A man in his 20s was taken to hospital in Stephenville and then on to the Health Sciences Center. Police say he was not wearing a helmet and are looking at whether impairment or speed played a role in that crash. Well, St. John City Council calls it a matter of safety, but others argue it's making a move against the homeless population. Last week, Council voted to build a fence around the performance stage on George Street. Here now, Sarah Blackmore has more on the city's latest controversial fence.
From George Street Fest to New Year's Eve to Mardi Gras, this stage is host to lots of events every year. But the city revealed new plans for the stage last week. An 8-foot-high fence, similar to the ones here around the pool in Bannerman Park. Council says this one will provide an extra layer of security and can be removed and replaced for scheduled events. But some wonder what it will mean for the city's homeless population. The stage has become a shelter for some to sleep, and this housing expert says those people should be considered.
No doubt that there are some issues in regards to graffiti and some forms of vandalism being done. It's always about trying to find a balance, but it seems to be a lot of actions or reaction as opposed to, preventing something, planning well in advance. And I feel moving forward that individuals who are being displaced need to be consulted, having outreach workers go to the sites and finding and talking with them to seek alternate living locations. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, these individuals are now being moved, but they're just going to relocate to another location.
The mayor says ultimately it's all about safety.
It's not a homelessness issue. This is a public safety issue. It's the safety of the individuals that are there. It's the protection of city infrastructure, and it's prevention against the possibility of serious issues presenting themselves there. So this is based on a very dangerous situation that we over time have reviewed and have to take this measure. So homelessness is a very complicated issue. It takes cooperation and it takes collaboration from all levels of government and the community groups and people in the community. So we work to try to bring that level of collaboration to the table, but at the same time, we also need to make sure that we ensure public safety in these public spaces.
Ophelia Ravencroft, who represents downtown residents, was one of 2 councillors who voted against the fence.
I don't think it indicates a lack of sensitivity on council's part per se. Many people did acknowledge, of course, the severity of the housing crisis, of poverty, of homelessness in St. John's. We are all aware of how bad these problems are, but I definitely don't think this was the right response, and I was very sorry to see it go ahead.
Mayor Breen says the fence is estimated to cost around $20,000, paid for by the city, though no official timeline has been set. Sarah Blackmore, CBC News, St. John's.
Time for a quick check on your forecast. Ryan Snodden back in for Ashley this evening. Nice start to the week, but things really turning unsettled as we work our way throughout the next few days, thanks to a big blocking high setting up just to our south and east. And what that blocking high will do is keep this unsettled setup of warm, moist air, a conveyor belt of moisture traveling from the tropics up into the Maritimes, then into Newfoundland and Labrador. Now, the Avalon actually not making out too bad over the next couple of days is, again, just on the edge of that area of high pressure, but a lot of shower chances for Labrador and central parts of the island as we work our way through the next couple of days, and western parts of the island as well. We all do turn unsettled tonight. The frost advisory in effect for eastern areas, and then we are looking at that shower, cloud cover, warm, moist, muggy air mass working its way in for the next few days, and it is going to be remaining persistent for much of the week. Far from a washout, but we'll have to keep the umbrellas handy. We'll have your full forecast breakdown coming up in just a few minutes. Stokesy.
Thanks, Ryan. I miss that nickname. Well, in other news, the Innu Nation broke 2 of its own education records this year. It had the highest number of graduates from the Mushwa Innu Natwashish School and the most grade 12 students ever in the 2 Innu communities. In total, 34 graduates were celebrated this spring. The head of the Innu School Board says it's a big accomplishment.
They had 19 graduates, 18 at the grad last week. So it was the biggest grad that Natwashish ever had. So it was exciting. It was really a proud moment for everybody. There was a lot of people in tears when students started coming out, with their beautiful gowns, with their dates, and even with their babies. It was a proud moment for the community. I know it's tough, trying to go to school, being Innu, and trying to juggle life in your own community, especially if you have children. Because there was a couple of graduates that came out with, their babies in their arms, and that made me so emotional because, I could relate to that. So just seeing, a couple of graduates come out with their babies, and it was just, and to keep going and to keep going to school and, trying to raise your little babies as well. So it was a proud moment. It was emotional. I was just so overjoyed to see. From the time that the government, I guess the church at the time, took over, ran the schools, late 60s, right up until, the province ran it in 2008. The number of graduates that we know of that they had was 30 graduates. And that's between 2 communities. So Davis Inlet and Shahajit. So when the province and the government church ran schools from 1967 right up until 2008, the number of graduates was 30 students, Innu students in both communities. So for us to get, more than 30 students in 1 year is a huge success for the Innu.
That's just wonderful. Well, the Newfoundland and Labrador Arts Council annual awards were handed out in Stephenville Friday night. The Arts and Culture Centre was packed. More than 300 people turned up to see the 6 award winners and the long list of live performances. Here Now's Colleen Connors has more.
Morning, she's dancing in the kitchen to the music on the radio.
The Sherman Downey Band set the tone for the night, lively and excitable. 7 live performances, many with connections to the province's southwest coast, sprinkled throughout the evening.
Oh, what are you doing?
There is no Drag Artist of the Year award, Misty.
And spunky host Amy House brought a really fun energy to the stage, even some surprises. While the music and jokes were wildly entertaining, the true reason for the night was the 6 Arts NL Awards that highlighted arts in all aspects of the community. The 38th annual awards night was the first in-person gala since the pandemic.
And the winner of the Patron of the Arts Awards is St. Michael's Print Shop.
The St. John's Printing Shop that took home the first prize of the evening, Patron of the Arts.
This is a really special award for any organization to be given, especially so as we near 2024, which will mark St. Michael's Print Shop 50th anniversary, where pretty exciting.
It is hard to believe.
The Artist of the Year award went to Persistence Theatre Company.
I'm absolutely delighted that NL Arts has given this award to Persistence Theatre. The company started as a bit of a dream, a bit of a feminist theater company. That's something that'll work, especially because we were determined to pay living wages and, pay fair rates right from the beginning. And here we are 6 years later.
But Jean Graham's favorite part of the evening? When Caden White took the stage.
I did not even know what beatboxing was until that young fellow got on stage.
The winner of the Arts in Education Award is Anne Picard Vandering.
She won for her outstanding contribution to arts and education in the province.
But it's great. It's showing me that I'm on the right track, I'm on the right path, and that I'm supported by the community to keep doing the kind of work that I'm doing.
Susan Shirk took home the Hall of Honor Award for her work with transforming the Wonderbolt Circus. Jessica Brown won the Emerging Artist Award. Wallace Ryan received the Artist Achievement Award and sent in his acceptance speech from his comic book shop.
Much love to everyone out there. Unity. Hi.
Colleen Connors, CBC News, Stephenville.
It was the 95th running of the Tely 10 road race on Sunday. It was held much earlier than usual. Hot temperatures have forced organizers to move the date of the race. Last year, it was held in October. This year, organizers started the race earlier, hoping for cooler temperatures. But it was still in the 20s as racers finished.
It's not exactly what I would have hoped for leading up to it, but then for the day, yeah, it was the best I could do today, so yes.
So the last race was about 9 months ago. Yeah. Typically they're about a year between each other. Did that impact your training at all?
No, I'd be ready to run this whenever they want to throw it at us, but I probably would prefer, a little bit further ahead in the air, but yeah, no, it's fine.
A bit warm, but definitely to my advantage. I'm from Ontario, spent many summers on the track, sweating buckets. I want people to know why I'm here and what brought me to St. John's, and that was my Aunt Jen. She passed away from brain cancer in October 2019, and that was really hard for me, my family. One of her best friends here, Debbie Shortle, she told me like one of the things she loved the most was watching me run. She was the reason I moved out here. Like, I always felt it was a place, like, I just felt a deep connection because it was a place she made her dream come true, and I felt like I could do the same here.
Congratulations to everyone who took part in the Tely 10 race yesterday. Well, Newfoundland and Labrador is the only province where Uber isn't on the road. The issue has been stalled for years, but now the wheels are turning and not everyone is happy about it. The CBC's Zach Gowdy explains where things stand now.
Could Uber be on the road to St. John's? Finally, the issue has been stalled out for years, but now there's some movement, and not everyone's happy about it. But first, what's been keeping Uber out all this time? What's changed?
It started with the launch of a new downtown safety coalition. A shortage of taxis is fueling safety concerns downtown. Taking questions from reporters, St. John's Mayor Danny Breen let this drop.
We've had some overtures from Uber and discussions from other companies involved in ride sharing. So we're working through that process.
Working through the process? Overtures with Uber? That's new. Until now, Uber and the city and the province have been locked in a standoff over a key issue: whether Uber will have to follow all the same rules here as a regular taxi company. This question comes up in just about every city Uber rolls into, but more and more, local governments are finding ways to make it work. Newfoundland and Labrador is now the only province with no Ubers on the road.
Now, the city and province may be ready to yield and rewrite their rules around ride-sharing.
If a rideshare company comes here, it needs to be a level playing field.
As for the taxi industry, Jiffy Cab's owner Chris Hollett says he isn't afraid of Uber, but he's not on board with separate regulations for ride-sharing.
For them to be classified as different than a taxi service is crazy, because they pick people up and they drop them off.
The city and province used to make that point too, but now they may be veering towards Uber's point of view instead.
Just like Airbnbs is to accommodations, ride sharing is becoming more common. I think we have to see the reality and we have to be prepared for it.
But if the roadblocks are lifted, will Uber come? And if it did, would it make things better? What if we get Uber, but regular taxis go out of business? And what about Uber's surge pricing model, where the ride gets more expensive at peak times? What will the surge price be on George Street at 2 in the morning?
So we can rewrite the rules around ride sharing. We can clear the road for Uber in St. John's. But there's no guarantee that ride sharing would make it easier to get a ride or would make downtown St. John's any safer. But this issue has been going nowhere for a long time. It needs a jump start.
A nice start to the week, but things turning more unsettled with increasing clouds, some showers rolling in throughout Tuesday, lingering into Wednesday and much of the week. Your full forecast is coming up. Time for a full look at your forecast. Ryan Snodden back in for Ashley tonight. And let's start with the highs today. Getting a little cool across, especially northeastern parts of the island. Highs of 10 in St. John's, 8 in Bonavista. Those cool temps tonight in the north and east, prompting a frost advisory. We'll show you that in a sec. Note the temperatures nice and warm in through Labrador. Wreckhouse wind warning also in effect for tonight. Southeasterly winds gusting to 100 kilometers per hour, and that frost advisory from the Bay of Exploits, Grand Falls, Windsor, down into the Clarenville region and also the northern Avalon. High pressure dominating. That is going to keep the skies clear tonight, hence the frost advisory in effect. So do cover up those frost sensitive plants. Note this frontal boundary off to our south, remaining there for now, but it is going to be lifting northward over the next 24 hours, increasing the clouds, bringing the shower chances in, and then that really unsettled southerly flow will continue for a good portion of this week. So let's play it out. Note the high pressure area in firm control through tonight. And those clear skies again with the frost advisory. By the time we get to tomorrow morning, we're going to be looking at that increasing cloud, but a dry start to the day, except for the southwest, Port aux Basques, Burgeo into the shower chances from the get-go tomorrow. Also Labrador City into a pretty good chance of showers from the start of the day. Increasing clouds for the rest of the region, and those shower chances increasing from south to north across the island throughout the afternoon. Northern Peninsula, southeastern Labrador, you folks certainly seeing some building clouds, but it looks like you will stay dry with your shower chances not rolling in until tomorrow evening. Tonight, temperatures ranging from 6 to 9 degrees across the island will be into the double digits and even teens across Labrador for tonight. As we look into the forecast for tomorrow, as we said, Port aux Basques, shower chances from the very start of the day, as well as Labrador City. Everybody else some sunshine early, and then that cloud again building in. Shower chances building in with the clouds, and we are looking at those temperatures anywhere from 14 to 17 for most of the island. The Straits into Cartwright, Happy Valley Goose Bay into the 20s tomorrow. That'll be our warm pocket for sure with the most sunshine there. Then for Tuesday night into Wednesday, you can see that general flow here. Southerly, warm, certainly humidity on the rise as well, so we'll feel the moisture in the air. That setup for Wednesday will certainly keep the south coast unsettled, but with this southerly flow, does look like we'll see the opportunity for some sunshine breaking through from Corner Brook into Central and even across to the metro area. Can't rule out a few afternoon sunny breaks tomorrow. For Wednesday rather. More unsettled for Labrador on Wednesday with steadier periods of rain pushing in through Happy Valley Goose Bay. Best chance of sun will be Corner Brook to Gander on Wednesday, but can't rule it out for the metro region as well. Temperatures near 20. And then, as you can see here, this setup will continue even into Thursday. Rain continues in Labrador along this frontal boundary. Southerly flow keeping the south coast locked in fog and drizzle. Inland areas, though, from St. John's and across into Central should see some sunny breaks. And Friday into Saturday, it does look like the clouds will dominate, but again, opportunities for some sunshine for St. John's and eastern Newfoundland. Drizzle certainly into the morning, and then that kind of retreats into the afternoon. So overall, Canada Day not looking too bad for Saturday at this point. Of course, keep you posted throughout the week. There are those shower chances though for the next couple of days. And for Central, those shower chances again, especially through Thursday. Again, a bit of a drier setup for Friday into Saturday, but the opportunity for morning drizzle certainly there with this setup. And note the temperatures staying quite mild. Now, the west looking a little wetter, certainly through that Thursday to Saturday time frame. It's all going to depend on where that kind of corridor of moisture ends up setting up. But right now, it looks like western Newfoundland, the best chances of seeing those shower chances right into Saturday and the weekend. So we'll keep you, of course, posted on that. Happy Valley Goose Bay, eastern Labrador, similar story with that stream of moisture coming in from the south. And western Labrador, looks like we'll see a break on Thursday before that unsettled weather kind of works its way back into your region as we push our way through Friday and into Saturday. That is your forecast now.
Salvage operations are underway as experts begin to piece together what may have caused the Titan tragedy. The U.S. Coast Guard is launching what's called an MBI, or Marine Board of Investigation, into the fatal submersible implosion. That's the highest level of investigation the Coast Guard conducts. Here's more from this weekend's press conference in Boston and St. John's.
This case has been extremely complex, involving a coordinated international, interagency, and private sector response in an unforgiving and difficult to access region of the ocean. In total, the Unified Command directed 11 surface assets, 5 subsurface assets, 4 air assets, and completed 39 search and rescue sorties, totaling almost 13,000 square miles. And while the outcome was not what any of us had hoped for, I am very proud of the team of responders who put forth their best effort to locate the submersible.
Upon receiving notification that the submersible Titan had suffered a catastrophic failure with the loss of the 5 lives on board, the Coast Guard declared a major marine casualty and convened a Marine Board of Investigation, commonly referred to as an MBI, on June 23rd. I am serving as the chair for that investigation. An MBI is the highest level of investigation the Coast Guard conducts and enables the U.S. to fully leverage investigative resources Coast Guard-wide and capitalize on an extensive network of cooperative relationships with international maritime administrations and organizations. The MBI is currently in its initial evidence collection phase, including debris salvage operations at the incident site and evidence collection in coordination with Canadian authorities in the port of St. John's, Newfoundland. After the on-scene evidence collection efforts conclude, the MBI will typically hold a formal hearing to gather additional witness testimony and evidence in a setting that is available to the public. During the course of the MBI, the board will first and primarily work to determine the cause of this marine casualty and the 5 associated deaths. The MBI, however, is also responsible for accountability aspects of the incident, and it can make recommendations to the proper authorities to pursue civil or criminal sanctions as necessary. However, any subsequent enforcement activities would be pursued under a separate investigation.
90% of the time, or even greater, when the RCMP responds to any kind of call for service, we already know that a criminal matter has occurred. Now we're investigating the what, who, why, and where. But in certain instances, we have an event and we don't know if a criminal matter occurred, so we take preliminary investigative steps to determine if any of the elements of the offenses that might apply exist, and then we will make a determination on a path forward. Does that make sense?
Yes. Could you provide an example of what may lead you to that conclusion?
Well, I don't want to speculate on anything like that, but if we get into, if our inquiries lead us to believe that certain actions were taken or not taken, to this general question may have been negligent, or what we believe we need to investigate that they could have negligent. And that's, I don't want anybody to think that that's what we're saying, but that would be an example of that.
And that applies to the crew aboard the Polar Prince, as well as any other private citizen that may have been aboard the ship?
The investigation will be all encompassing. We're going to look at all that, yes. I mean, I've been doing police work for 33 years. This is a very unique circumstance. Partly because of the jurisdictional issues, partly because of the prolonged uncertainty, the specifics and the expertise that went into the vessel, the voyage, all that needs to be understood by us. So it's a very unique circumstance.
As we mentioned earlier, the Transportation Safety Board is also investigating the Titan tragedy, looking into what happened and why. The TSB says its job isn't to assign blame, but rather prevent similar catastrophes from happening in the future. Meanwhile, a forensic investigator says much can be learned from the debris field left behind from the Titan implosion.
Now this morning, TSB investigators boarded the Polar Prince to examine and document the vessel, to collect information from the vessel's voyage data recorder and other vessel systems that contain useful information. We have also begun conducting interviews with the people aboard the vessel. At this point, we are not in a position to provide specific details about the occurrence or about the investigation that are not already in the public domain.
The debris field itself tells a story. Now, where the parts are, how far apart they are, what direction they're lining in. So hopefully they're copying in situ where the parts are, mapping that, and that itself will tell some kind of an interesting story and give us clues as to what happened. Then, of course, once that's done, then they'll start recovering. And just like in an airline crash, they may try to reassemble the sub to put the parts together like a puzzle and determine where the failure point was. In a case of a massive implosion, that's not going to be an easy task because much of the craft will have disintegrated.
Well, continuing the conversation on what we do know and what's still left to learn about the Titan tragedy, the CBC's Andrew Chang has this special report.
According to the U.S. Coast Guard, an ROV, a remote-operated vehicle, was able to scour the ocean floor near the Titanic wreckage. A few hundred meters away, they found this.
The initial thing we found was the nose cone, which was outside of the pressure hull.
That was clue number one. Soon after, they found a large debris field where they found other components. They analyzed what they looked like, compared them to the design specs of the Titan submersible, and it seemed like a match. It was all consistent with the components used to build the Titan, but they also think the debris tells them something about how the Titan went down. Not a slow, steady leak, but rather a violent, sudden change in pressure.
This is an incredibly unforgiving environment down there on the seafloor. And the debris is consistent with a catastrophic implosion of the vessel.
A catastrophic implosion is what can happen when you are subjected to the incredible pressure of being so deep underwater. You know, the Titan wreckage is about 13,000 feet below sea level. When you're that far down, the forces acting on the hull of the ship, many thousands of pounds per square inch, you know, I've heard it compared to having the equivalent of an Empire State Building crushing you from all sides.
We've taken a regular styrofoam coffee cup, and that's then strapped to the outside of the submersible in a net bag. And when we eventually come up topside and recovered, the actual same coffee cup is basically that size.
The big question right now is how such a catastrophic implosion could have happened. You know, it was an experimental sub. That was literally written on the death waiver passengers have to sign to be allowed on board. And a lot has been said about the cavalier attitude that the company's CEO had when it came to safety, innovation, and pushing the envelope with, you know, new materials never before used in a sub of this kind. To recall, the Titan lost contact with its mothership on the surface partway through its descent. This was on Sunday morning. They should have returned by the afternoon, but didn't. And it was only that evening the Coast Guard was alerted. Then it was roughly another day until a Canadian plane would arrive, dropping sonar buoys into the water. You can think of those like underwater microphones. It gave search teams listening capability. So here's the thing. There's this period between Sunday and Monday where nobody had any clue what was going on down there. And the suggestion seems to be from the Coast Guard that's when the implosion likely happened.
This was a catastrophic implosion of the vessel, which would have generated a significant broadband sound down there that the sonar buoys would have picked up.
They would have heard the implosion if it had happened while their sonar buoys were deployed, but they heard nothing. I mention this because it tells us something about what the crew's final moments might have been like. You see, The great fear here was that death would have been slow and unbearable. Imagine, you're trapped all alone in a 22-foot hunk of carbon fiber. It's cold because sunlight can't penetrate the water. There's limited food, limited water to drink, only a single porthole that you can't even look through without powering the ship's lights because it's pitch black on the other side, and you're running out of oxygen. Perhaps a silver lining in all of this is that in the case of a violent implosion, death would have been instantaneous. On board the Titan, Hamish Harding, a British billionaire explorer, Paul-Henri Nargeolet, a renowned French diver, Shahzada Dawood and his son Suleiman, two members of one of Pakistan's wealthiest families, and Stockton Rush, the CEO of OceanGate Expeditions, the company behind this doomed voyage, finding its final resting place not far from where the Titanic itself sank more than 100 years ago.
This has been the first time someone's challenged Putin and seemingly got away with it, right? And as a dictator, that's a very dangerous thing.
A short-lived mutiny of Wagner mercenaries against the Russian army on the weekend will take you to Estonia and speak with an international relations expert about the fallout and what it could mean for Putin's grip on power. Russian President Vladimir Putin condemned a short-lived armed insurrection launched by the leader of the Wagner mercenary group. The Russian leader said all necessary measures have been taken to protect the country and to protect Russian people from rebellion. Putin says he'd honor his promise for Wagner fighters to relocate to Belarus if they wished, or to sign a contract with the Russian army, or simply return to their families. Now, the leader of the Wagner mercenary group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, is speaking out today. Prigozhin says he was protesting the Kremlin's intent to merge his fighters with the Russian army, and says he halted a march to Moscow to avoid spilling Russian blood. The revolt was suddenly called off on Saturday when a supposed deal was struck that would see Prigozhin exiled to neighboring Belarus. It's seen as the biggest challenge of Putin's 23-year reign. So what does all of this mean? Joining me now is Terry McDonald, a lecturer of international relations at Tallinn University in Estonia, and he's a Newfoundlander. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure to join you again, Carol.
Well, it was a remarkable unfolding of events over the weekend, a threat of armed insurrection in Russia, Putin vowing punishment for treason, then suddenly Belarus strikes a deal. Can you unpack all of this for us? What's the significance of what went down?
Well, of course, I mean, only three people really know what happened. Putin, Prigozhin, and Lukashenko. And none of them are really talking. Putin has just had a video released of him, but hasn't really addressed the issue. So it's hard for us to say exactly what even happened in the first place, right? It's kind of a moment where you have to take a wait and see, because it's internal Russian politics are problematic, to say the least, right?
For sure, yeah. A lot of speculation happening. And U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says the insurrection shows cracks in Putin's role as leader. What do you think about that? What do you think this means for Putin? Does this weaken his grip on power?
Well, I mean, it's certainly not good for him, right? It's been 20 years. Putin's basically had unchecked access to Russian power. All the levers of government and society have basically come into his control. So this has been the most overt challenge to him, I mean, of course, there were some protests, but you get opposition leaders like Navalny have been jailed. Others have been assassinated, right? This has been the first time someone's challenged Putin and seemingly got away with it, right? And as a dictator, that's a very dangerous thing, right? So, I mean, Putin's greatest fear has been a color revolution, for years now. So even if this one didn't necessarily come to ultimate fruition, it does show that there is room to challenge the Russian state for the first time in a long time. So this can be dangerous for any person who's had an absolute control on power.
And what does this mean for the war in Ukraine? How does all of this affect that?
Well, I mean, taking troops, the Wagner troops especially have been the most comparatively effective in the Russian side for the war. So taking those troops away from the front line is inevitably a good thing for Ukraine at the moment, right? Still, we don't necessarily want Prigozhin in power. He's a brutal mercenary war criminal, in Ukraine, in Syria, and lots of other theaters around the world, right? I mean, this is someone who's bragged about smashing the heads of deserters with a sledgehammer, right? So can you just seamlessly bring these two entities together? I mean, that seems unlikely. What will Prigozhin's role be going forward? This is another big question. So right now, it's hopefully at least going to be a distraction for the Russian army. It's going to take some of their forces away from the front line, just as Ukraine is probing for weak spots in the Russian lines. So ideally, it will at least remove some Russian troops at a very crucial time.
And what concerns does this raise for the West in terms of Russia as a nuclear power? Anytime you see instability in Russia, it can be a scary thing. What concerns does this raise?
Well, I mean, first of all, it shows how threats to democracy anywhere are threats to democracy everywhere, right? The world is very much seeming to align, as Blinken and Biden have indicated, into camps of democracies and authoritarian governments, right? obviously, having Putin challenged in power is probably a good thing, but we have to be careful with what you wish for with these sort of things, right? You don't want Russia to collapse into chaos. They have the world's largest nuclear arsenal, most likely. We don't want just chaos there. And like I said, we don't want Prigozhin taking power in any way or anyone like him, right? So we have to be careful what we wish for there.
Well, Terry McDonald, thank you so much for your time today and for sharing your thoughts on this. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Carol. Nice to talk to you.
Well, Russia was a key topic for leaders of Nordic countries meeting in Iceland for 2 days. The meetings come 2 weeks before a NATO summit in Lithuania to discuss Russia's war with Ukraine. Today, Trudeau says he and fellow leaders agree this is an internal matter.
We are watching, of course, and we are reflecting carefully on what the implications could be either in Ukraine or elsewhere along Eastern Europe, including in Latvia, where Canadians are stationed right now. But we also know that this is something that the Russians will be dealing with over the coming days.
Now, Trudeau says it's too early to tell what the situation in Russia could mean for the war in Ukraine, and says leaders discussed possible challenges and consequences for their own security and for global stability. The 38th Annual Arts NL Awards were given out in Stephenville Friday night. This was the first in-person awards night since the pandemic. The province's Arts Council presents 6 awards each year, recognizing artistic accomplishments in many different formats. Here's more from 2 of the night's big winners.
The winner of the Arts in Education Award is Anne Picard Vandering.
The 2 other finalists are incredible women with years of experience in arts education. Julie Lewis and Lynn Panting, it's an honor to be held in such good company. I think you're both all that, a bag of chips, a puff bar, a Pepsi, a long treat, and a case of icy cups. Thank you so much for the work you're doing. You're making a difference. I'm a woman. I'm the first member of my family who was born Canadian. I'm autistic and, as I said, hard of hearing. I'm a feminist artist and teacher. All this is to say, my life circumstances still place me in a position of privilege. And I'm fortunate to advocate for others and committed to using my privilege to help those who are underrepresented.
The award goes to Susan Shirk.
When I look at the competition, I think, this is just me, why me? But I never realized, I think, what I was doing at the time. I just followed what I'd like to do. And one of my earlier, I'm going to say game changers, was I thought it was important that the province understood the economic contribution that the arts makes to the province as a whole. So I set out to do that. It was one of my toughest, still considered one of my toughest. The artists hated me. How could you put a figure on our work? They were outraged. I got nasty letters. I knew that it was not the thing to do, but I knew that it was important. And I think now we do know that economics play very much into the arts and that we do bring so much and we have to be valued for that particular worth.
Looks like a great time had by all. And one quick note before we leave you tonight, there are some frost advisories in place for some parts of the province. So if you have any plants that you put out over the weekend, any sensitive plants, you might want to cover them up overnight tonight to make sure that they stay safe. Well, that's it for us on this Monday evening. Thank you so much for spending part of your night with us. Hope you have a great night.